And we want to turn now to Dr. Nir Boms, Research Fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center. Thank you very much, Dr. Boms, for joining us. We appreciate your time, sir. Well, every international support is, of course, crucial nowadays, especially as we've just been discussing here in studio. There's this fear that the pressure on Israel not to go back to action after the ceasefire is going to rise. What indications do we have in terms of the sentiment in Western capitals?
Sentiment is fluid and it can change in a day or in a couple of days. I think we can anticipate some pictures, some psychological warfare. It's also in the same context. It's important to note that the Americans are here, the British are here, many of the other Europeans have sent delegates here to show resolve. And I think this comes from the understanding that this particular war is not between Israel and Hamas. It's a much larger reorientation of the Middle East. And if Hamas stays and if Hamas prevails, this gives impetus for other radical players in the region who would soon also go to Europe and elsewhere. So I think we'll still have the ability or some credits to finish the job. Perhaps there's going to be some pressure to do it in some different ways.
Yeah, what many leaders, including very much so Arab leaders here in the region, are saying behind the scenes, not something that they say in public. But before we get to that, let's just go back to here, to the Middle East. Egypt playing a second fiddler, if you will, to Qatar in those mediation efforts. What at stake here for Doha and Cairo at this point, again, being the brokers of this deal to an extent?
Look, there was an old statement of an Egyptian general who once said, "We have to fight for the Palestinian cause until the last drop of Palestinian blood." I think it's important to remind ourselves that this is what the Egyptians are doing. Of course, they would not accept getting refugees to the Sinai. What had happened with Arabs fleeing from Syria or with Ukrainians fleeing from Russia cannot happen with Palestinians perhaps fleeing from Gaza. Egypt was kind enough to bring weapons in tunnels that they conveniently perhaps ignored, but they would not let refugees come out to perhaps ease some pressure. And I think it's important to note that point as well. Of course, the Egyptians want to make sure that they are relevant. They don't just leave the floor to the Qataris. So they are also trying to play the role of mediators. We have a certain degree of common language with them, but it's important to note that specifically after October 7th, that without Egypt, I don't think we could have had this event really happen.
Right. And speaking of Qatar's double game here, the Qatari Prime Minister meeting today the Iranian Foreign Minister in Doha after the Iranian Foreign Minister arrived there from Lebanon. So again, if anyone needed help in illustrating this axis here in the Middle East, there you go. Reportedly telling him, however, let's cool things off. What do you make of it?
Well, they have assets that they need to keep. At this point, they are able to demonstrate a certain potential victory picture for the axis of resistance. For the Iranians, perhaps it's more convenient for them to sacrifice, quote unquote, Hamas than to do the same with Hezbollah. But they still would like to keep Hamas in power, to keep this lever of influence. And perhaps if they pull things off, they will be able to create a more convenient diplomatic solution, again, to their strategy. And that's probably is the explanation for this strategy. They would like to show that they are mediating and trying to alleviate the crisis and alleviate humanitarian crisis, but we need to also remember that they were very much the ones who helped create this crisis in the very first place.
Yes, indeed. And Dr. Boms, briefly before we let you go, the Saudis still keeping more or less silent. What's the view from Riyadh this evening?
I spoke personally to a number of Saudis, throughout this period, and I think they very much understand, and I think some of the neighbors in the Gulf also understand what is happening here. Again, A victory for Hamas is a victory for Iran, is a victory for the axis of resistance. The Saudis today are in an axis of renaissance. They would like to see a different Middle East. So they are happy to offer some help and some sympathy, but they certainly do not want the Hamas to win.
Right.
And I think the statement of Bahrain that we've seen recently, that was perhaps the most brave statement coming from an Arab leader. Again, as we've seen with the Abraham Accords, we can perhaps even assume tacit Saudi support for that type of a move.
Yes, the Abraham Accords, the potential of them to further expand, perhaps helping in exacerbating this vicious attack we've seen on October 7th, those who simply do not want to see this region prosper in peace. Dr. Nir Boms, Research Fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your time and your insight.
To be here.
Thank you.